All right, Allie. Is it working? I think you hear me. Good morning, everyone. I want to welcome you and thank you for taking part of your Saturday morning to come and join us at 40 Church for homeschooling through high school. And we are happy to have here Heather Mangum and Marty Mangum, who Marty is the pastor of this church if you're not familiar with 40 Church. And Heather is his wife, a representative for class here in. And we also have Justin Nail and his wife Crystal, who have homeschooled for many years, and Heather will give you more of a formal introduction. This is more of a welcome and glad you're here this morning. But Justin and Crystal are here from Rocky Mountain, North Carolina, where Justin is also wearing many hats over there, and so is Crystal. And Jonathan, we thank you, Jonathan, for coming, Benjamin. I do that every time. Sorry, Benjamin, for coming and being here with your parents. So anyway, just a few housekeeping things we have restrooms out this back, the right, your left, my right, I went that way. We have plenty of opportunities for some coffee and some snacks out there if you need a little pause and pick me up with a little caffeine, some chocolates, and some dates and so forth. And then let's see here. Also, I did put a love offering basket out there. We're so thankful 40 Church is willing to host these events for us. So you can either go online and give online, or you can drop dollars in the basket. But any of that is also appreciated. Thank you for hosting 40 Church for the homeschooling through high school. And Heather Mangum will do a more formal introduction of herself and Justin and Crystal. I'll put that with that. Do you want me to turn this one off?
Good morning. How are y'all? I was worried with all the rain and wind and things that people weren't going to actually come. I was like, but I'm glad y'all are here. I'm glad you braved the weather, and it looks like the Lord is gracing us with a little bit of break in the weather. I just want to, first of all, once again, thank you for being here. Our hope is that you will leave here today feeling encouraged and more confident in the task that lies before you, which is homeschooling through high school. I do want to preface that we're not here to bash public, private schools. We're not here to promote or give weight to private universities or community colleges or anything like that. Our goal for this day is to encourage and equip those that God has called to educate their children at home. That's our goal, okay? So if God has called you for this task, we are here to partner with you. We are here to lock arms with you. We are here to encourage you and help you to see that you can do this. That is our goal. I'm going to introduce, Justin is going to come and speak for just a little bit. He is a friend, and he's also a colleague. He is a fellow AR. He's a pastor, a father, a husband. He's a challenge director. As I've come to know Justin, I respect him, and I admire his passion, first and foremost, for the Lord, for his family, and for the people of God, and also for home education. He wrote one of my favorite books, and you probably, I shouldn't say you probably, but you might not have ever heard of it because, it's not one of those that are just out there. But it's titled The God-Centered Homeschool, and I have a copy of it back there for you to read, glance through it, but it has definitely been very helpful for me in my homeschool. He is going to share just a little bit about the vision for homeschooling through high school and what that looks like through our Classical Conversations program. So welcome, Justin.
Well, good morning. I want to start off by talking about what matters most, which is making sure that our kids know God. But before I do that, let's take a moment and let's pray. Let's pray. Father, we thank you for your goodness. We thank you that you are sovereign and wise, just and merciful. Father, we are grateful for the Lord Jesus Christ, who is our only hope. We are grateful for the forgiveness of our sins through him. We are grateful for the promise of heaven. And we are grateful for your word that is a lamp and a light for our lives. Father, we're thankful for our children. And we ask that you would give us grace to shepherd them well while they are under our care. And Father, I ask that you would bless every family represented here. I ask that you would bring encouragement and help and just beneficial information to moms and dads in this room. And I ask, Father, that ultimately you would cause their children to know you and love you, and that they would be equipped to serve you well in this world. We just commit this time to your hands. We ask that you would bless it. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Amen. So talking about homeschooling through high school, but I will like to contend that education falls under the larger umbrella of parenting. And for Crystal and I, as we think about our own two boys, so this is Benjamin. Benjamin is 13 and in Challenge B. And Jonathan is our oldest son. He is 18. He's finishing up his freshman year at Patrick Henry College in Purcellville, Virginia. Both were homeschooled all the way and through classical conversations. But first things first. The big question that we had to ask ourselves was this: what would success look like by the time our boys leave our home? We know that we can't do everything we might want to do in the years that God gives us with our children in our home. But what would success look like for us? What, by the time they graduate and leave our home, would we look back and say, we thank God at least this was accomplished or this was done? As we think about that question, one of the first things that hits us is that the things that matter most are things that we can't make happen. They're things where God has to work. And so we have some things that we do. We have some steps that we can take. We have some paths that we can walk. But we are taking those paths with prayer and dependence upon God, saying, God, you take these loaves and fishes and you got to multiply them. And you got to make these things happen for us. But if you've ever heard me speak before, I always talk about the same things because they are very precious to me, and they are the way that I think about our own parenting, of which education and homeschooling has been a part of that. And it's these four aims. So number one is God. We wanted our boys to know God. In fact, nothing else really matters more than that, right? Because I have no promises that my boys are going to see age 20 or 30 or 40 or 50. Here's what I know for sure. Just like me, one day they are going to stand before God. And I want them to stand before a God that they know. I want them to stand before a God that they have loved and that they have trusted through the Lord Jesus. Now, if that's what I want, right, and God has to ultimately make it happen, he has to change their hearts, he has to give them faith, but if that's going to happen for them, I don't want them simply learning about God on Sunday. And I don't want them simply learning about God when we go to our Bible. I want them to go to the Bible. God has revealed himself in his word, and I'm a preacher, and I love his word. But the same God who reveals himself through his word also reveals himself through his world. So when we think about where does education fit into this, I just didn't want to pursue any kind of education path for my boys that was going to undermine our goal of helping them know God. Rather, it seems to us that if God created this world, if this is my Father's world, then everything that we study in his world should only increase confidence in what they already know about God from his word, that these two things should go together. And so one of my favorite education verses, it's the verse that caused me to write the book Heather was talking about, is Romans 11:36. And Romans 11:36 says, "For all things are from God, through God, and for God. To him be the glory forever. Amen." And we could spend some time talking about the Greek language and parsing out the text, but I'll just tell you the Greek word all there means all. Okay? When it says all things are from God, through God, and for God, it's talking about nature. Every tree, every bird, every stone, it's from God, through God, and for God. It's talking about language and the way languages work, the very fact that we have words and the ability to communicate in sentences and paragraphs from God, through God, and for God, right? History, in fact, in the context, Paul was looking at what God has done in history, and he makes this statement. So all of history is God's story. It's the study of history is the study of God's providential acts, right? All of history is from God, through God, and for God. So if we are doing education rightly, every time we are studying any subject, we should be able to bring this lens to it. Whatever we're studying, God is its origin. God uses this subject providentially in this world to accomplish his purposes, and it ultimately exists to bring glory to his name. What that means is that if my kids can tell you about trees, they can tell you about root systems, they can tell you about photosynthesis, they can tell you about ecosystems, But if they've never looked at a tree and their jaw dropped and they stood in awe of the wisdom and the power of God, they've missed the point, right? All true education should lead us to worship. All true education should lead us to the place where we marvel at the God who made us. And so when you say, okay, that's the kind of education I want to give my children an education where they recognize that the heavens are declaring the glory of God, that the sky above is proclaiming his handiwork, that day to day, everything around us is pouring out speech about who God is. So that I just look at my hand and God is speaking to me. Ever just look at your hand? Especially, just start going microscopic, right? And the wonders just increase, right? So that immediately made us think, okay, that takes some education options off the table for us, right? Because there's a lot of education options that are not simply, they're just not going to allow us to give our kids that kind of education. So we were trying to find what kind of education model gets us here. I love classical education, but I love Christian education more. And the reason I do classical education is because we have found that it serves well the cause of Christian education. If Charlotte Mason worked better, or if I thought that unschooling was the better path or something, then I would give up classical in a moment and go do those. But at least in our experience, we have seen the wonders of how the classical model just seems to fit the way God caused us to learn, which means it fits the way God caused us to learn about him. And so it has just been wonderful to watch those things come together. So, God, most important. Second, character. Character matters more than knowledge. Character matters more than academics. The way I put this often is if I had to make a choice between my boys being smart and being kind, I'd choose kind every day of the week. Frankly, there are a lot of smart people in this world, but if you have smart people in this world who are cruel, they're a curse on the world, not a blessing. So character matters more. What does that mean for education? It means that we want to be able to teach our children in a way where we're going to have an eye towards the building of godly character. It starts when they're little, right? And helping them, even as you're doing your first read alouds with your little boys, your little girls, to say, was that a good decision? Was that a bad decision? Right? You know, young man, you know, young woman, this is what God says about that. You're helping them to think through the decisions that characters make and the stories that they read with an eye towards character. But especially as they get older, especially as they're moving into those middle and high school years, the opportunities for character development are incredible. Especially because through the challenge program, we get to hit on these character traits such as ownership and discipline and self-control, right? I always think about how in Titus, I believe it's Titus 2, Paul says to Titus, he says, make sure the older men are taught this, make sure the older women are taught this, make sure the younger women are taught this, and all of them have their lists. And then to young men, he says one thing, self-control, right? And I can just tell you, having been directing challenge classes for many years, and for whatever reason, our community is a boy-heavy community. And then being the parent of two boys, I can tell you self-control was at the bottom of so much. And that if they can learn how to say no to this, to say yes to the right things, right, it sets them up for greatness in the future. So we had to think through, okay, we want an education path that is going to serve that character development, right? Underneath God, underneath character is skills. Everybody say skills. Now say skills matter more than subjects. That is huge. It's a mantra. Put it in your head, okay? It is something you've got to remember. Skills matter more than subjects. Why do skills matter more than subjects? My last name is Nail, N-A-L-E. Back maybe a century ago now, there was some young lady in my family, and our last name used to be spelled N-A-I-L, just like a hammer and nail, okay? And the kids at school were teasing her, and they were calling her Tack. And she didn't like it, and she went home and complained to her parents, and the next time the census man came around, that's when we changed the spelling of our last name, okay? So with a last name like N-A-I-L, what do you think my forefathers probably were? Carpenters, right? So if we were living in colonial Williamsburg in the 18th century, I could say to Benjamin here, your grandfather was a carpenter, and I'm a carpenter, and you're going to be a carpenter, and therefore I could cater their education to exactly the calling I knew that they were going to be going into. I could spend our time working on not only the skills of carpentry, but the skills of economics and finance and how to maintain a business. And we could talk about interpersonal relationships and how to treat customers. And I would make sure that they had an education that prepared them for that future calling. We no longer really live in the day of apprenticeships. And frankly, I have no idea what God's going to call my boys to do. I have no idea. The beautiful thing about skills is that skills apply across callings, right? So you think about the family that teaches their kid Spanish, and then God calls the kid to be a missionary in China. And they think, if only I knew, right? We'd have studied Mandarin. Subjects, honestly, here's the truth. Most of us probably remember very little of much of the subjects that we studied in school. But it was the skills that you developed in the studying that helped shape you and make you who you are. The subjects, we study great subjects in classical conversations. I love the subjects that we study, but they're not even the point. The point are the skills that are being developed in the students as they walk through the subjects that we study. And then, if you're going to be aiming for God, if you're going to be aiming for character, if you're going to be aiming for the development of skills, why not use the best subjects? And so it was important to us that we choose content for our kids that was going to serve rather than take away from their development as godly young men. By the way, about skills, one of my favorite verses, I think it's Proverbs 22:29. Do you see a man who is skillful at his work? He will stand before kings. He will not stand before obscure men. If you're here and you're a believing Christian, I can tell you that sometimes we feel that culture is becoming increasingly hostile. And sometimes we can have a little bit of fear about the future of our kids if they're followers of Jesus Christ with conviction and love the Word of God. But here's the thing about skills. Skills will make your children indispensable. Frankly, if your son's the best plumber in town, nobody cares what he believes. Right? And so there's a way where through the development of godly skills, we can set up our children to stand before kings, to have an influence in the days ahead. Now, what first won us over to classical conversations, neither of us were homeschooled. We were scared to death. We had no idea what we were doing. We were sure we were going to screw up our kids. I mean, we were definitely there, okay? But what won us over was, at least what won me over as a dad, was the first time somebody showed me that scope and sequence. And our oldest, Jonathan, was like 3 or 4. He didn't exist yet. Right? And we're looking at the scope, and I'm already looking at like what they're studying in the senior year of high school. Oh, they're reading R.C. Sproul. They're doing Mere Christianity. Oh, this is great, right? I can tell you that God did abundantly more than we could have expected. We were nervous because I was pastoring a small church with no other kids, our kids' age. We were then going to be choosing to homeschool. That whole worry about kids, homeschool kids being isolated and all that was a real worry for us, right? Sometimes we make fun of that now because we've lived the reality. But having not lived the reality, we were really worried about socialization, right? We have seen how God used the community aspect of classical conversations to bring into the lives of our boys, not just friends, but other moms and dads who've decided to care for them and love them as we do. And we've had the opportunity now to entangle our lives with so many other families and so many other boys and girls that are walking on this same journey towards God, character, and skills. And it's why I love going to graduations. Because now I can look back and I can say, oh, I remember when he was this big. And I remember when she was that. And I've seen what God has done. And watching that happen. Just as in the local church, there's this wonderful binding of hearts that happens as you walk through things together. Right? Experiences bind hearts together. So it is with classical conversation. So it is with community. And we've gotten to watch that happen. Okay, so we're supposed to be talking about especially the upper challenges, right? Why go all the way through? Why not jump out at challenge 1 and go over to a local high school? Or why maybe go through challenge 2 and then not go to community college when it can be free, right? Well, it all depends on your goals. So I'm going to start at the bottom now and go back up and explain how this has worked for us. So first of all, subjects. I am thankful that because of those upper challenges, Jonathan, my oldest, got to experience subjects of study he likely would never have gotten to experience otherwise. For example, I don't think many kids these days still read the Odyssey and the Iliad and the Aeneid. And not too long ago, I read a book called The Founders and the Classics. And it's a wonderful book that looks at the education of our founding fathers. And it spends time asking the question, how did these men become who they were? Yes, they had their shortfalls. Yes, they had their blind spots. But yes, they also had some remarkable convictions that led them towards heroism, that led them towards a willingness to put their necks on the line to do what they believe was right. And one of the things that's interesting about that book is it shows how it was the study of ancient literature that shaped these men. That if you'd gone to George Washington and asked George Washington, who's your hero, he would have in a moment said, Cincinnatus. Not Cincinnatus, that's ecclesiastical Latin. Cincinnatus, okay? Right? If you said Caesar in ancient Rome, they'd look at you. He was Kaiser, right? Classical Latin. Anyway, we won't go there. So George, like Cincinnatus, right? This guy who had been given the power over Rome as dictator to save them, and as soon as he saved them from the enemy, he laid down all his power and walked away and went and lived a farmer's life. He was not holding power for his own benefit, but only to serve. And when others were coming to Washington and saying, Washington, serve again, serve again, serve again, he said, we are not setting up a monarchy here. And he walked away, and he literally quit everything he was a part of. Even like his church board he was a part of. He quit everything and went and became a farmer, right? Read that book. It's a great book that just shows you the benefit of subjects of study that, frankly, if you're just thinking about your child's future career, if that's all you're thinking about is their future profession or vocation, you're going to miss some character shaping, worldview shaping, character defining subjects that are really, really worth spending time in. Theology. So I will tell you that for my son Jonathan, I can tell you as a preacher's kid, it's sometimes tough being a preacher's kid. And Jonathan's a preacher's kid. And I'll tell you, I was one of those kids who made a profession of faith when I was so young that I don't remember it. And by making that profession of faith so young that I hardly even remember it, that put me in my teenage years through lots of doubts and questions about assurance and am I really saved and do I really know God and all of those kinds of things. And so one of our convictions in parenting as our boys have been getting older has been we're not putting pressure on them. We're going to preach the gospel to them. We're going to tell them what we believe and why, but we're not going to be trying to get them to make a decision. We're waiting for the day when God comes and they come to us and say, I want this faith to be my own, right? Well, Jonathan's getting 16, 17 years old, and I keep having conversations with him. Just, Jonathan, what are you thinking about these things? And what he would say is, he was really struggling with the nature of faith. What is faith? Because Jonathan's something of a stoic. He doesn't have real highs and real lows, right? Some of y'all in here are more emotional. Some of you in here, when your highs are high, you're high. When you're low, you're low, right? Jonathan's much more just, God made him much more stoic. He doesn't get why. And so his thing was, to the best of his ability, he was trusting the Lord Jesus Christ, but he had never had the warm fuzzies experience, right? He was really struggling with what is faith. And I remember him walking downstairs in Challenge 4, having been talking with his class and reading Mere Christianity, and coming down, and for the first time, him on his own, having with me one of the most in-depth theological conversations of his whole childhood, right? And we were able to talk these things out, and he was baptized, and he came to. So all that to say, we said our first goal was that they would know God. In our anecdotal experience, God used the content of Challenge 4 to cause my son to know God. So I'm grateful for that. Okay, skills. Let's talk about skills. So Challenge 3 and Challenge 4. Here's what you need to know about how Challenge works. So many of the skills, whenever you look at that scope and sequence in the catalog, there's that blue lit line that has all these skills, right? The skill of exposition. Everybody say exposition. I'm going to go so long. Heather, you're going to have to stop me. Marty wishes that every member of his church had the skill of exposition, right? I'm sure he does. Because here's the deal about exposition. Exposition is being able to take a text, any text, and pull out of it what the author is actually intending to say, not what you read into it. Right? You ever been to a Bible study and people are reading Ephesians and somebody reads a verse by Paul and what does that verse mean to you? Right? Well, when I hear that verse, I like to think of, what does it mean? What do the words mean? What does the grammar mean, right? God communicates through language. And the exposition says, let's, with integrity, pull out what the author is saying, then bring our own understanding to it and see what we do with it, right? So, for example, I direct Challenge 1. We read The Call of the Wild. I love The Call of the Wild. It's a fun book. It is not a Christian book, right? The Call of the Wild is all about the influence of Jean-Jacques Rousseau and how man would be much happier if we go back to the primitive, how it's all about land rights and ownership, and how if we could throw all of that off because so many of our laws that keep us in chains are all about property, if we could just go back to primitive when people just didn't live that way, that's where we would truly be happy. Well, when I'm directing my Challenge 1 class, I'm first asking them, what is the message of Jack London in this book? Prove it to me. Right? Show it to me. Where in the lines, where in the pages, where in the words do you see the message being communicated by the author? Only then do we then hold it up and say, now, does the Bible have something to say about this? Challenge A, we start at the kiddie end of the pool. Right? Maybe some of you guys have Challenge A kids, and you looked at that list of kids novels they're reading. You thought, my kid read that when they were in 3rd grade. I'm off the camera. I forgot I was on camera. Sorry. Okay. Help me with that. Okay. It's okay if your kids already read those books when they were in 3rd grade. In fact, that's wonderful. Because in Challenge A, that's the first time we're putting these kids' books before them and saying, we're not just giving this to you for entertainment. We're asking you now for the first time to look at an author's work and say, what is the message and how do you know? So if it's a little bit beneath their level, that's what we want. We're not just throwing them into Dostoevsky, right? We're starting them at the kiddie end of the pool, right? And then Challenge A, they're practicing that skill of exposition. Challenge B, they're practicing that skill of exposition. You get to 2nd semester Challenge B, we increase the difficulty a little bit, right? We're starting to get a little bit more towards the deeper end. How? We're throwing them into some Edgar Allan Poe. We're throwing them into some Mark Twain. We're throwing them into some of these guys, but we're doing it still with short stories. Right? We're not overloading them yet. Challenge 1, American literature. Scarlet Letter, To Kill a Mockingbird, right? But you know what's more difficult than American literature? Challenge 2, British literature. Now we're going to do exposition with Pride and Prejudice and the Canterbury Tales. Oh, but you know what's more difficult than that? Challenge 3, Shakespeare in poetry. You want to know the value of Challenge 3, Shakespeare in poetry? We are creating wordsmiths. We are creating young men and women by the grace of God who are going to be able to have an influence on this world because they know how to use language in a way that is persuasive, in a way that is clear, in a way that is winsome. Poetry does that. One of our directors, she's Challenge 2 director, but her son's gone all the way through, is now at App State. And she was telling us the other day, she said her son complained when he was studying all that poetry and Shakespeare. But she says every once in a while when he starts talking, he just starts adding his word choice. It's his vocabulary. He has become so much more eloquent in his ability to make a point because of his study of Shakespeare and poetry. You know what's a little more difficult than that? The Odyssey, the Aeneid, the Iliad of Challenge 4, right? So do you see how that works? Now, what happens if you just jump out in the middle of that path, right? It's like your kid learned to swim, right, in this skill up to, maybe halfway through the pool, and then, unless they're going to get that skill practice elsewhere, and they might, right? But we've got a path laid out that walks them through continuously. Now, I'm using exposition as an example. That is how Challenge works with every single skill that we're teaching these kids, right? This is why your directors are really facilitators. That's really what they are. They are giving your children opportunities that otherwise they would not have to the same degree in your homeschool to practice these skills. And one kid comes into the class, and what I'm doing right now scares him to death, right? He's scared of standing up in front of others. But when we get into their Socratic circles, he's such a good listener. He knows how to really hear and understand what the rest of the class is saying. Someone else in that class, this is easy for them. Oh, they get up and they can speak and they can talk all day long. But when we get in our Socratic circles, the skill they got to work on is learning how to be quiet and listen. Because they haven't learned how to actually hear rather than just thinking of the next thing they want to say while somebody else is talking. Right? So with every skill, your kid comes into that next school year at some different place. And every kid has their strengths and every kid has their weaknesses. But we're meeting every kid where they are, and we're taking them a little further. You want to evaluate your kid be careful, we're being recorded. Do you want to evaluate you in a way that I think is wise? This is my suggestion, okay? Think less about how much of the subject they retain and how much more about how much more progress in the skills you're seeing, right? Are they continuing to make progress in these skills? Because that's what's going to set them up for the future. Frankly, 99% of jobs they're going to go to, they're going to have to be trained in what to do there anyway, right? So it's their ability to learn in the future. It's their ability to comprehend. It's their ability to think reasonably. Make your kids show their steps in math. Make your kids show their steps in math. It's not about whether or not they know how to solve quadratic equations. Most of your kids are never going to. How many of you are solving quadratic equations as a regular part of your life? Right? Oh, we got some, right? Right? We got some, especially homeschool moms. Actually, might be the one group, right? But here's the reality. Why are we studying those higher maths? Because it trains the brain to think logically. It moves from premises to conclusion. Right? It's the same thing with Latin. Why are we studying Latin instead of conversational Spanish or French? Here's the truth about conversation. It's two totally different goals. Two totally different goals. If you really want to add conversational Spanish or French or German, do that. But know that with conversational language learning, if you don't use it, you lose it. Right? So you need to have your student in some place where they're going to get to regularly practice that conversational language, or they're going to lose it. In Latin, we're not learning a conversational language. Nobody speaks it. The whole goal is to be, the whole goal. It's so many goals. One, it's further training in logic. I call it kale for the brain. It's spinach for Popeye. Why? Because it's causing them to be critical thinkers. They have to take from the endings bucket. They have to take from the definitions bucket. And they have to take from the rules bucket. And they have to bring all three of those things together in every single word that they translate so that the neurons are just firing, right? If you just want your kid to get some benefit in the English language, yes, just have them study Latin vocabulary. If you want them to continue to grow as critical thinkers, sharp thinkers, have them translate. And frankly, A, B, and 1 are the hardest years of Latin because that's when you're doing a whole lot of sowing and not much reaping. If you leave at challenge 2, 3, and 4, you miss the fruit. Because that's when we get to start putting on, I do this, I'm sorry, Heather, they shouldn't do this. In the background on my phone, right? When I did Challenge 2 Latin, I would put Braveheart music on in the background because it's all about Caesar killing Gauls. It's all battles. It's all death and despair and throwing darts at people and bodies heaped up like hills. And so, I put on that Braveheart music in the background, and we're creating our class translation, right? So we're taking it a sentence at a time, and we're speaking with an Italian accent or our fake Italian accent because it's fun, right? And then we what do? We go back and forth over words, right? Should we say Caesar hurled the dart? Should we say Caesar threw the dart? Either is accurate, which gives us the best translation so that our English readers will get the sense of what Caesar is saying here. It doesn't sound fun. It is fun and wonderful. You're just seeing so many of these skills come together for these kids. It's not a conversational language, right? I need to move on. Character. So I will tell you from experience as a Challenge 1 director, many young women come into my class already having reached the point where mom's been able to take some steps back. Now, you should never take a step back from inspecting what you expect, being that accountability person. You should never take a step back from being the coach, right? What does that look like? Jonathan's a good writer. That's one of his gifts. He has many weaknesses, he'll tell you, okay? Writing's one of his gifts. He would turn in a paper to me. There had to be a time when I would say, Jonathan, from other students sometimes, this would be a good paper. You can do better. Do it again. A coach knows when their team is giving their best, right? There have been other times when Jonathan worked so hard on something that he was in tears and it just wasn't coming together, and I had to come along and say, you know what, I am more impressed by your work ethic than the fact that God didn't give you artistic ability, right? Therefore, let's go get some ice cream and don't worry about it, okay? A good coach knows when to encourage. A good coach knows when to admonish. Don't ever lose that role in the challenge years. The best parental role during these upper challenge years is the conversation partner role. Now, they're having great conversations on Community Day. Don't miss the conversations that can be happening in your home. Don't miss the opportunities to. You don't have to read every book. That's not a bad thing to say. You don't have to read every book that they're reading. Get them to tell you what they're reading. Get them to share with you, to re-express and to tell you in narrative form what they're reading, and then discuss it and ask questions about it and have real worldview-shaping conversations with them about it. Okay, that's one of those skills that honestly in Challenge A and Challenge B, they're not there yet, right? They're still developing. They're still maturing, right? Oh, I got to go back to the girls and boys. I often have boys come into Challenge 1, and they definitely are not there yet, right? It's usually by the time you're just going into Challenge 2 that the young men have caught up with the young ladies in some maturity of thinking, okay? Especially when you get into the real conversations, the Socratic circles. So it's another example of why stick through it to the end. A, B, and 1, you're doing a lot of sowing. 2, 3, and 4 is where the reaping happens. And by the reaping, I don't mean them just displaying for you what your hard work's been about. I mean, they get to begin to pull out the fruits that serve their souls and help them grow, right? It's in Challenge 2, 3, and 4 that they get to, those art grant proposals and the conversations they have about worldview in Challenge 2, the Francis Schaeffer videos, How Now Shall We Live, right? Challenge 3, Patriot's Guide to American History. I hope you don't agree with everything in that book. Right? It's okay not to agree with everything in that. If you agree with anything in any history book, be wary. Okay? But I love the way that the authors are at least trying to be objective, and they are trying to bring out both here are the flaws and the things that were wrong with America's founding, right? And here are the things that we still nevertheless should not fail to notice about our founders, right? Your children will be much more prepared to serve God in the future if they know who they are and if they know the history of where they have come from. Right? These are conversations that are so valuable for them. Okay, so character development, ownership, discipline, self-control, but also how to be kind to people they disagree with. When I was a Challenge A director, now this was eons ago, okay? When I was a Challenge A director, it was me and 6 girls in that class. That was fun. And all 6 girls had been raised in conservative evangelical homes, and so I would have to become atheistic evolutionary Bob. And I would just tell them, I'm becoming atheistic evolutionary Bob, because I didn't want them to get the wrong idea. Mr. Justin said. And then I would just begin to push back. Why? Because we want them to begin to take ownership of their own beliefs and their own faith, right? The way they understand the world. So I would begin to push back, maybe a gay marriage or something like that, right? And, well, who are you to tell somebody else how to live their life, right? And they would say, but the Bible says, and my little preacher heart's going, I'm glad they know what the Bible says. But Bob doesn't give a flip what they think about what the Bible says. And so Bob would say, I'm glad that book means something to you. I don't believe in it one bit. I think it's a collection of historical records. I don't even know if what we've got in the Bible represents what was written back then. That book means nothing to me. What else you got? And those girls would go, Bob, you're stupid. That's Challenge A. They don't know yet why they believe what they believe. They're still parroting their parents' beliefs, right? The goal, by the time they get to the end of Challenge 4, is for them to have come into their own. That can be frightening for parents, okay? Because sometimes they're questioning things that you were taking for granted. One of the beautiful benefits of the Challenge 3 and 4 years is those are the years, at least in my experience, where our son was often teaching me, where he was often having insights and thinking and having conclusions that I had never thought about before, right? And it becomes this dialogue within the family that serves everyone. And so they're growing in their own thinking, which of course affects their own character. I'll tell you what the benefit has been for us too. So Jonathan's now at Patrick Henry. He chose to go to a school that is academically rigorous. Like it's a very small school, but it's a school that has a pipeline into DC internships and all that kind of stuff. So everybody there, like there's no slouchers, right? It's very different than the college I went to. Okay, it's very high octane. when Jonathan calls, I'm having to say, Jonathan, don't work so hard. Right? Because he'll say, I'm trying to have time. I wanted to go, be part of this debate team, or I wanted to be part of this play over here, but I've got this report due on this day, and I got this done this day, and he's spending hours and hours. But he learned diligence. He learned that inner drive to get things done. I would love to say we instilled that in him. You know what instilled that in him? His community. In particular, his classmates. He had a few other students in that class that for him, he was not going to let them beat him, right? And it was a friendly competition, but boy, would they pick on each other. If you can have your student be with at least a few of the same students, challenge 1 through 4, what happens in those relationships can be wondrous. And the way that they grow together and inspire one another towards that godly work ethic, right? And then knowing God. Well, you're already getting to study God's providence in Challenge 3 as you study American history. You're already getting to think about God who is revealed himself to us in word as you become wordsmiths and practice the skill of exposition. But for us, it really was those worldview conversations in Challenge 4 that were so impactful for Jonathan. One of the conversations, he came down the stairs from his room one night and Dad, Lewis, this is from the beginning of the book, right? Lewis says here that everybody around the world has this sense of the moral law written on their hearts, written on their consciences. And he said, do you think that's right? Now, I could have been like, duh, we've talked about this 100 times in church, But I wasn't like that, right? Because sometimes it's just hearing it from somebody else, right? Hearing it from another voice, it causes them to think about it new, to think about it in a different way. And so we were able to have that conversation, and I really think that was something that the Lord used. So all that to say, in our case, God used those worldview conversations happening in Challenge 4 to build him and to give him a stronger relationship with God. Okay, how am I doing? Good? How much? Oh, I need to stop. Oh, okay. I'm stopping now. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to just take a break and let everybody go to the restroom. I think there's some water, maybe some coffee, some things out there for you guys. In about 3 minutes, we're going to come back in here. We're going to move this, and Crystal and I and Marty and Heather are all going to come up here, and y'all get to throw darts at us, and we'll do our best to see if we can serve you. We'll see if we can answer some questions, okay? You're dismissed.
If everyone could start making their way back to their seat, we'll get started. Hey, Allison, will you make a round out there and just see and bring back in? Thanks. Because I was trying to see how many people were on it. I was trying to see how many people were on it. That's what I do in church too. I don't know why it matters. It really doesn't matter. Huh?
I don't want to be thinking about it when I get
Yeah, that's true. All right, guys, we're going to get started. I want to start with, I guess, Justin and Crystal. Maybe, Crystal, you want to tell us just a little bit about your family. I know Justin did already. And then, Marty, I'll let you tell about our family.
Yeah, I'm trying to think what else I can possibly say. um, yes, so we are from Rocky Mount, and we have been in CC since 2007, ever how long that is. Um, and we have two boys, and Benjamin is really enjoying this. But so we've been married for 20 years, and originally my degree is in elementary education, and so that was part of what made this so hard to figure out for us in the beginning, or scary, because I had all of these things that I had to unlearn, really, in the beginning. So I know there are probably, I've been talking to a lot of directors and new families lately, and they all seem to have this sense of they don't know what they think they need to know to do this. And I'm like, no, it takes time. It's a process. And so just know that, where we are is not where we started at all. At all.
So our family is made up of 8 children. We've graduated 2 from Classical Conversations. We didn't start on the homeschooling journey. Heather and I neither even considered it until our faith was growing, and the school system, which our oldest daughter was in, became more confrontational, and we found it to be contrary to what the scriptures taught, and we started wrestling through, what does this look like? And at that stage, what year was that? 2004. And so we didn't know anyone who homeschooled, and we were like, okay, we're just lost in this. We ended up going to a little place, found out they actually have a homeschooling store. Like, they have these things, and so we went and just sat there and looked at books, and we're like, we have no idea what we're doing. But we had an increasing conviction, much of what Justin has shared. We want them to know God, and we want to teach them such that they learn about God from the various subjects and things. And we've, by God's grace, graduated 2, and we have 6 more coming along, and they're increasing in age, and so we're not so much in the memorizing stage as much as we are wrestling with the ideas and such, and so we're grateful for that. Just watching them grow and learn and these skills and their knowledge of God as well.
Yeah, so that is really sad. We have one more elementary child left. It's like, oh, so sad. I just love these years if you still have littles, because it goes by fast. I just appreciate so much of what Justin said, and we also got to experience a daughter that came to know the Lord through the Challenge program, through one of her assignments, and that was Aaliyah. Some of you may have heard her do the recitation of The Story of God by Matt Papa. It was just powerful. She was only supposed to memorize 3 to 5 minutes, but memorized the entire 10-minute speech and on the day of her baptism was able to present that once again. And whew, it still just rattles me. You know how God can use just all these things. And that was for her IE, her individual event, if you're in the challenge levels now. So that was challenge 1. And honestly, guys, that was the year. There were only 2 students. So I know some of you guys wrestle with wanting to go where all the people are, or where this is, or where that is, or where this director is. Trust God. He's got this. Like, if he calls you there, he's gonna accomplish his purposes. We did move on to another group that had more people the next year because it was best for her personality and needing people. But God used that 1 year for her and 2 students and to save her. So I do have some prompt questions. I'm just going to kind of start asking some questions to kind of prompt some ideas, but you guys are also welcome to raise your hand or go to the mic in between there if you want to know more, or if you have more questions, just do that. So I wanted to start with, first of all, we were both all of us were just talking about how we're so excited to see so many dads here, because that is just pivotal, and I think in this, where are you going? You have to have this family vision. So we are thankful for that. But along those lines, I'd like to ask, I guess I'll start with you, Marty, since Justin just talked. How can fathers lead and support their families in the homeschool?
Well, that's a big question. It's multifaceted of how you can lead. I think it needs to be undergirded with prayer, that we are trusting God to use His Word, to use these conversations, to use these subjects, to begin to form them into the image of God. And so undergirding this with prayer, that God is the one who must move and change and save and help us along the way. And so undergirding in prayer, and I imagine for the majority, the moms do the heavy lifting with that, and I think that's assumed in the question. It's not always the case. But for me personally, often in the challenge realm is where I seem to come in more with the support than I would have at the early stages. Because just my wife personally, it's like that upper math is like, I don't get all of this stuff, and I'm more of the logical thinker, and so just the way I'm wired, I'm helping ask questions and, checking in on them, because increasingly they are self-motivated in their studies. And so I find, especially with my boys, that I have to be the one checking in on them, encouraging them, and it's just been really neat. I've got one in Challenge 3 currently, and he's reading R.C. Sproul, and he's like, philosophy and all of these different philosophies. And Dad, I just read all of this, and I have no idea what I just read. And so just sat down with him, and it's like, he doesn't understand these 2 paragraphs. This happened last week. And I said, okay, I'm going to start back at the beginning of this chapter just so I can understand the context. And part of what I'm doing is modeling for him. You need to understand the context rather than just this paragraph. You need to broaden out a little bit. And so read through the context and read it out loud with him. And then begin to ask him questions about the text rather than telling him, this is what it says. This is what it says. This is what it means. I'm really trying to prompt him and ask questions. And that's what's often happening in the classroom setting as well. It's just trying to ask them questions to get them, to provoke them to think about this. And there may be times where I just don't know, I don't get it, where I will say, well, here's how I see this thing. And so it's just an engagement with your kids on their level, where they're at, questions they have, and just kind of reinforcing the structure and the material as well.
So I'll just add to that. First of all, if you're a dad who works outside of the home, you're outside of the home most of the day while the homeschooling is happening. First and foremost, don't begrudge what you're doing. Keeping the lights on is a huge part of supporting the homeschool. And so just don't take that for granted. You are serving the homeschool by the things that you're doing for your family there. Secondly, I would say one of the best ways that you can serve your wife is by helping make sure that she's respected by her kids. When the kids hit middle school ages, things happen to them. And sometimes it feels like an alien has invaded the brain. Sometimes there's new hostilities that weren't there before, or maybe life is exposing them, right? And understand that's not because of the curriculum you've chosen for homeschooling. That has nothing to do with it, okay? And so, Dad, one of the things that you can do during that time when I'm just going to be blunt here, sometimes kids don't like mom and mom don't like kids. One of the best things you can do is be an encouragement to your wife. You make sure that she is feeling your love for her and your support for her, and then model that respect for your wife and discipline significantly disrespect towards your wife by the kids. I will tell you, and we don't have time now, but I can tell you, come talk to me after, I'll tell you some stories of what we've seen God do when that moment comes and that tension is there in those middle school years. That's when many parents want to jump ship. That's when many parents want to put the kids on the bus. That's when they want to do anything because they need some relief. The reality is, if you can trust God and walk through it, right? Do not give up. You find that that's one of those joint experiences that bind hearts together, and that your older children will look back on that, and actually they will greatly benefit and often have a closer relationship with mom or dad than they would have had otherwise. So model that and make sure your wife is respected. One other thing I would say here is it's important, Dad, that you have this vision for homeschooling, because mom is going to be dealing in the middle of the trees. Mom's dealing with, why can't we figure out this math problem today? And if that's not going well and she's getting frustrated, right, you've got to be the one that comes back in and brings that big picture. You've got to be the one that can come back in and say, hey, let's just remember where we're going. It's not about what happened today. It's about what's happening over the long term in the development of skills and godly character, knowing God. And just, my wife said something recently that now I'm sharing with everybody because I think it's so helpful. And she made this comment. She said, when we look back at our homeschooling years with Jonathan, we never ended a homeschool year and said, oh, we did great this year. Not once. Honestly, every single year, we felt like we saw more of the things that didn't get accomplished than the things that got accomplished. And it was only after his graduation that we were able to look back and to see how God took the loaves and the fishes, and he really did bless. So, Dad, you've got to have this vision even more convictionally than your wife, okay? Because you have to be the one to come to her, to be that encouragement and that help when the days are hard. Now, I can point you to some great books. If you're not a reader, use Audible. I can point you to some YouTube videos. There's so many ways for you to serve your own heart in that way. But serve your family by making sure that you have this vision and have these convictions. Otherwise, everything stands on the edge of a knife. Okay.
Amen. And amen. Yeah, that was good. I will say that whole middle school years and everything, Vodi Balkum speaks on homeschooling your kids a lot, but one specific thing stood out to me, especially with the boys, and it came true with my boys, and I was like, oh, this is what he was talking about back then. But I think boys naturally have this like want to lead, right? God is equipping them to be leaders in this world, and so there comes a season where the boys do buck up against mom more so, and it can be disrespectful for sure. And it's like, okay, I understand what's going on here, but I'm still your mom, I'm still your whatever. And so that's where dads are super helpful. It's like, but you don't have the authority of your mom in these situations, and helping them see that proper role here. And also dad just come along and letting them lead in ways that are proper and appropriate versus just in their homeschool type setting. And so, yeah, I just think that's great. And taking moms out for dates randomly is awesome too. That works really, really great, especially when there's a bad day. Yeah, just say, hey, Mexican tonight. Yep, that's happening. Or just ice cream and car trips, riding on the back roads. Great. Anything, just get her out. All right. So I know many of you are here for more like, I need to know practical, because that's what we hear all the time. And that is good. It is important. We know that, you're launching these children into the world. So what does that look like practically, right? This is all, we have this vision. Now, what does that look like practically? So we're going to kind of start heading in that direction. With so many high school options, I'm going to ask the nails. With so many high school options, how do I decide what is best for my student? So with all the different ways you can go through high school. That's when I see people leaving because they're like, there's so many options, the free options or the this or the that. How can you decide what that is?
This is one of those questions that can take the form of many other areas of life as well. I mean, it goes back to, should my kid go to college or not? Should should I marry this person or not? Should I? I mean, it's what is the will of God, and how do I discern the will of God? And so I'll just tell you my own understanding of how we discern the will of God in these matters. First and foremost, we pray and express our dependence upon Him. We ask the Lord to lead and to guide us. Second, we educate ourselves, right? To the best degree that we can, with the margin that God gives us, we seek to make sure that we're able to make an educated decision. Then, making sure that we're aiming for the glory of God above all. Whatever you do, whether you eat or drink, do all to the glory of God. If the glory of God is your goal, let that color the decision that you make, and then make the wisest decision you can, and then lay your head down at night and rest, trusting that God's going to bless. Okay? Now, I don't know if that's where you wanted me to go with that, but honestly, that's how I would answer that question, is it's a matter of discerning the will of God. If you are not a part of classical conversations or not a part of those upper challenges, or maybe you're in the early challenges and you're trying to decide about the future, one of the ways that you can take a step in that gathering information is go sit in on some upper challenge classes, right? You don't have to step into this thing blindly. You're welcome to come into classes, let the directors know ahead of time, I'd like to sit in on a seminar or two, or for a day if they'll let you, and most of them will. And you'll be able to just kind of see for yourself some of these things that I was trying to give you a glimpse of today.
That's good. I would add to that, for us a few years ago, the Lord just pressed it on my heart. It's like, I need a vision statement. I need something on those hard days where I just want to go eat Mexican. I need something to look at and to practically like feed my soul, to say, this is where we're going. This is our North Star. This is where, I mean, yes, God, but I need the practical, like, this is what we're going towards. And so we did develop like a mission statement or vision statement for our family, the two of us. And that has been super helpful for me. And so now, as we're deciding what is right for our family, it's all filtered through that. And we go over that every year. Every year we look at our vision statement, and I pray through it. I pray for each one of my children, because they're all different. And, you know, what you do for one might not be what you do for the other. We do stick with challenge because we believe that's right. But even in challenge, you are the teacher, right? Like, you can move your kid. If you need to hold them back a challenge, it's okay. You're not necessarily holding them back. You're just putting them where you feel like is best for them. And so I think just, you know, putting it under prayer and trusting the Lord with that, but you're looking at your children individually and having something that you're going to stick to that's going to help guide you in those decisions is super helpful. It's been helpful for us. Crystal, let me ask you this one. I think you can, and this is a broad question, but you can narrow it down however you would like. Practically speaking, how can I set my high schooler, middle schooler to high school up for success academically? So practically speaking.
Yes. In my mind, this begins when they are at the beginning of the challenge program, because like Justin already shared about how, you know, if you just look objectively at what they're doing, the books they're reading in Challenge A, I mean, I've had families say to me, that's way below my child, you know, but the thing is, we're starting to build habits. So when you get that challenge guide and it gives you all of these, a section for every single strand, because if you just look at the weekly thing, it's like, do this in this short little blurb, and I'm a detail person, so those short little blurbs, I'm like, but what does that look like? How do I do this? And so there are these whole other sections that give me ideas for what it might look like each day of the week. And so I found, especially with my boys, who are also not as detailed, a lot of those A, B, and into 1 years just look like, this is how we study our Latin. This is how we take this big thing apart and we work on it incrementally every day. And some of that feels tedious. Sometimes they don't appreciate it. Sometimes we give them the freedom to try out their way, just to help them see how maybe it's not the best. Doing all of your math lessons in 1 day, You have the pros already. Let's see if you can come up with some cons when we try it out. But really just developing those habits. And especially if you have students who, I'm going to say the ones who don't struggle, really paying attention to how that is going, building the habits when there are steps that they could easily skip, there are corners that they could cut and still be okay and get everything done. You're working on building those habits when they are 7th, 8th, and 9th grade, so that when later they're faced with something that does get a little bit harder, something that is going to be a challenge for them, you've kind of set them up for success to step back and say, how do I take this apart, and what do I do every day to help get through that?
Marty, I'm going to say that let's ask you the other side of that. What about with children that you might have in your home who have more academic struggles and or delays, and who might, I mean, our curriculum is pretty rigorous. I don't like that word because if you've read Teaching from Rest, you know that means like rigor mortis. So I don't like that word rigorous, but our curriculum is rigorous. It's in a healthy way. But so what would you say? How do you set that student up who struggles academically up for success?
I would add, I was just reading recently, someone used joyful rigor and tied that into that word. And so that was meaningful to me because the rigor has the negative connotation. And some of the practical things I think we have seen just in reality. We're homeschool. Maybe they're sitting in their pajamas all day. Like you need a space, and it's not your bed to do your schoolwork. And we've made a rule: you can be in your bed if you're reading a book, not when you're doing math, not when you're doing other things. You're just trying to avoid the rest of life many times. And so, setting them up with a space. Remember the rest of the question?
How do you set them up for success?
So yeah, and one of the things, my wife is administrative, and I lack those gifts. And so I so appreciate she has created, I don't know, at least a dozen. It changes every year. Like, hey guys, I'm setting you up for success. Here's where you can write your assignments. Here's how you can do this. You can do this your own way. She's always trying to get creative and trying to tailor make it for each kid. She made some this year, for instance, and the kid that probably struggles the most academically, I'm not using that. I'm going to use the guide. And she gets really frustrated with that. And I'm like, the guide is the guide. Sure, use the guide. I wouldn't want the thing either, but, so I'm not telling that to him. So this is my thoughts as well. I'm like, I'm with you, bud. Like, that just seems like extra to me. That means I got to write something else down. I don't want to write anything else. And so she's like, oh, this would be so helpful. And I'm like, no, that's more work. I don't do to-do lists because I got to write them. It's just like, I'm not administrative. Like I got to write it and then I got to check it off. Like, I could just do it. See, I got an amen over here. And so, and just to give you some background from me, I'm probably different than many of you. I was not a studious kid. I had read one book when I graduated high school. I was nearly illiterate when I graduated. God rescued me and brought me and, ended up going to seminary. And, I'm having to read like 8 books in a week. And I'm like, I have not read 8 books in my life. And so it's really hard for me to learn. So I have to read and reread and reread. I have to work really hard at it. So I can identify with my kid who struggles because I'm like, yeah, we might have some issues going on. And so just encouraging them and utilizing various tools as well. I mean, I was anti-audiobook for my kids. Like, no, you need to read. But it's just like, but this one particular kid, it's like they will retain everything if they hear it. But to read it, it's just they struggle in that particular area. And so we've gotten more flexible. Early on, I'd have been rigid and said, no, we're not doing this. We got to play by the rules. But just reality is like they're different. They're unique, and God has created them as such. And so we're just trying to in a sense, fan the flames however we can And you got to think creatively. We used to be that box, and it's just like, okay, none of these kids fit in the box. And so we're just working individualistically with our kids, just trying to encourage them and how God has made them. Some kids probably will not go to college, and that is okay with me. And if he wants to be the best plumber in town, then praise God. And I want to encourage you toward that, and I can teach you some things along that round. And we can spend more time outside if we need to, or whatever that may be. So it's just knowing your kids, knowing their hearts, knowing what is going to frustrate them and cause them to shut down, and challenging them and pushing them, but not exasperating them and provoking them to anger and those types of things that the scripture would say. Gwendolyn has... Mhm.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, with this particular kid, I won't name him, but everybody probably knows, our family knows who that kid is, right? If you know us, you know that kid. We have looked at tech school. For instance, Piedmont Community College up near where we live, they have like a blacksmithing tech school type thing. He has a forge in the barn. He likes hammering metal and banging things and making knives and like primitive videos on YouTube. He's going to dig something and build something, and that's just kind of where he thrives. And so we have considered things of that nature for him and looked at options like that. That's not something where he is, at this point, I don't think he would be dual enrollment. Managing what he has now is quite challenging, to use that word. But yeah, that's something that we would certainly consider for him. That I can't necessarily teach you blacksmithing. I don't know anything about it. I can watch YouTube videos with you. However, you may need someone who understands the properties of metal. You may need to understand fire and temperature, and there's some things and some skills that you're still going to need to learn to be able to do this. And so that reinforces the education part of this. Math that you don't like to do, well, if you're doing blacksmithing, you're going to do some measurements, and you're going to have these type of mathematical things and these skills that you're going to need to apply to this. And so what I try to do is, like, this is what you want to do. What skills are you going to need? And then I try to reinforce the educational aspects and how these things that we have you doing now are going to help you to be a better blacksmith if that's what you want to do. So that's how we try to tie it back in.
Yeah, and I would say that I would add to that's really good. We have also had the benefit of graduating 2 students, so we have seen from Challenge 4, so we've seen the benefit of community. Is he going to pick up all the things and all the subjects and do all the books that all my other kids did? No, he's not. He's not. He's not going to read every book. And as a matter of fact, Apologia's physical science book is on Audible too. I mean, like literally, we do Audible. I mean, we have the book, and he has to follow along, but it's Audible. And Scribd, yeah. So, and now I'm hearing the libraries, you can do all those. But anyways, so yeah, those things are definitely in consideration, but I just see the benefits of going through the community. And Challenge 4, I just have to, sitting in my Challenge 4 daughter's class last year, it brought me to tears because I just sat in, the whole first semester, they go through the Old Testament together. Imagine your 17 or 18-year-old students who are about to go into the world, sitting around a table with peers their same age, wrestling through the scriptures. How else do you want to send your children into this world? Like, that alone is worth that Challenge 4 program for me. It was so good that class individually decided they wanted to do the New Testament in the second semester. and it was just beautiful. I mean, that again for me is it's not about the subjects. It's not about checking all the boxes. We have a different goal in mind, and I think Justin really did a great job of laying those goals out for your family. But practically speaking, the next question is, and Justin, I'm going to ask you this question because I thought your answer was good earlier. Crystal's like, no, don't say that answer. What about grades? Tell me, tell me how you determine or how you decide on assigning grades to your students.
So you're talking about transcripts and all
Yeah,
of that,
yeah,
right?
we're going to go right.
Yeah. So first thing I need to say about transcripts is that when we were beginning homeschooling and we were just getting into CC community, just getting to know some folks that were a little bit ahead of us in this journey, there was all this worry about transcripts. Oh, transcripts. I hope we get things ready for transcripts. We've got to think about transcripts. When it came time to do the transcript, so easy. So easy. Like it was, we were able to knock it out in an hour. I mean, it was not something to be afraid of. So here's what I will tell you that served us well. First, after ninth grade year, whenever we were going on a trip somewhere, we would find a college or two along the way and stop and tour it. We would take Jonathan with us, and the idea here was just for him to be exposed to different options, right? What was going to be options that he might be interested in. So he experienced little teeny private Christian schools. He experienced big state schools like NC State. We even took him to places like Georgetown just for him to like, whoa, you know. And we took him all kinds of places that were along the way. One of the things that we always did, often we didn't like set up appointments or anything. We just showed up. That was never a problem for these schools, and we would go to the admissions office, right? What would you like to see? What do you guys need to see from us? What we found is that every kind of school we visited, homeschoolers were not going to be an issue. They were well ready to receive homeschoolers, so we're definitely beyond the pioneer days, and thank God for those pioneers who got us here, okay? Second thing we found is that Jonathan did do some CC Plus classes. That's where you can get some college credit for the work you're doing in Challenge. And every school that we talked to had at least some way where they were going to be able to receive and accept those CC Plus classes. So we were very thankful about that. What I discovered in talking with those admissions folks is that when it comes to transcripts and homeschoolers, they really do take them with a grain of salt. They know mom and dad put those transcripts together, okay? So just to be honest with you, the transcript itself, just the putting the grades, the ones that we talked to, you always ask them their expectations. But most of them were saying, we don't care whether you use a graded scale or a non-graded scale. Just make sure it's clear on the transcript what scale you're using. So just put that in the bottom. And then what you're going to do is simply, and I'll tell you how we thought about it, did he make his way through all the material? Did he make his way through all the material, right? I mean, the beauty of homeschooling is if you take a science test and you get an 80, you can say, you're going to study this some more and take it again until you get it, right? So because of that, and because they know that mom and dad put together the transcripts, test scores do matter a little bit more for homeschoolers. They do. We found in our case, at least, that classical education served rather than taking away from being test prep ready, because they've already been doing all this critical thinking skills and all these reasoning and all of that. They've been working on writing and composition, all of that. So we found that helped. I will say my recommendation is 10th grade, take both the ACT and the SAT if your kid's looking at going to a college or university. See which one somebody else told us this. This was really helpful. Have them take either ACT or SAT sophomore year, see which one they do best at. Let that be their focus. Take a year and just add it in where they're doing 30 minutes a day of practice for ACT, SAT. Make that part of their homeschool and then have them take it again the next year. And let that be what they do. There is a new test, the classical learning test. So some schools are beginning to take that. Jonathan took that, and that really, really helped him with his scholarship at Patrick Henry. I mean, he I don't know if he'd be there if it wasn't for that scholarship. So that classical learning test was a cool thing as well that fits right with the classical model. The other thing I would say about transcripts, don't worry about the grades. That's easy, and you can literally Google and figure out how you want to put the classes in there, and that's not hard. What they want to see along with the transcript is what makes your student unique. I'll tell you what helps with challenge students. On the back of that transcript, put a book list. Here's what they read during their high school years. With classical conversations, you have an impressive book list. There are not many other students applying to colleges that are saying, I read Cicero and Latin, okay? And so that's very, very impressive for a college or university. Also, if there's anything else that makes your student unique. So in Jonathan's case, he ran, I mean, this was so easy. He ran a little jam and jellies shop at our local like antique mall place. Literally, he would just go get the jams, put prices on them, put them in the shop. Okay, that's how he pays for his phone bill and his car insurance. Okay, but he was able to put on his transcript that he was an entrepreneur. Right? So your student, look for those things that make your student a little bit unique. The other thing you need to know that at least for the climate right now, for the last 3 to 4 years, the number of students applying to colleges, universities has been plummeting. So more than ever before, it's not you trying to get into schools, it's all these schools competing for your kid. Okay? They are trying to get your kid. Nobody pays sticker price for colleges and universities. So when you're looking at those prices, don't sit there and go, oh, we could never do it. Nobody pays sticker price. Okay? Talk to those admissions departments if you're interested, and start talking, I would say, about sophomore year, because really senior year doesn't count. You've already applied and done all that stuff by the time senior year comes around. Junior year is where it's at for getting into colleges, universities. So that's why during that freshman and sophomore, especially sophomore, that's when you want to be touring, talking to admissions departments, and making sure that you have what you need to do that well. One last thing I will say is, if you are still worried about the transcript stuff, get parents who've done it before to serve your community. They can do a little 30-minute, literally pull up transcript and walk through it and ease a lot of those fears right there. So just rely on the community aspect of the folks around you who have done this before.
Good. Yeah, I would echo just so much of that. I mean, at the end, I do have a sample transcript from CC student, and I'll have those papers back there. I didn't want to put them out there because I was afraid it might distract you guys from like listening to the vision and the most important stuff. But I know the practical stuff is important, and there are some helpful resource website lists and things like that can help you. But really, truly, this is the easy part. Like, this is the easy part. The hearts and the relationships are the difficult part. Yes, Celeste. I'm going to say something, and then I want Justin to follow up with that. I want to echo also, they drove to these colleges and stopped and let them experience, which I think is great because it also gets the kids excited. But if you're just starting out, like, and you're in A, B, eighth, ninth, or seventh, eighth grade, whatever, ninth grade even, I would say pick your students' top 3 school choices. Do a public, do a private, and do, whatever. Just pick top 3, and you can go on their websites, and there are admission requirements, and that's the way you want to kind of tailor your child's transcript. UNC, University of Chapel Hill, they have an example of a transcript that they actually want. And so if you at least have an idea of the school you want, I mean, if you want to go to, want them to go to Harvard or wherever, then you want to start looking at what I know you don't want them to go. Well, okay, anyway, I'm just giving an example. Wherever that might be, look and see what their admissions requirements are. That way you can move in that direction.
Yeah, I would say, I think what he means when we would say admissions, they take it with a grain of salt. They know that the parents gave them the grades, but just the courses and everything that is, and that's why I would say work on those course descriptions and doing a good job of communicating what it is that our students are doing in each strand as they go through is going to be much more valuable than those letter grades or those number grades that are on there, because that gives them a more well-rounded picture of everything your student has studied. I have had parents tell me that they have given their students B's or C's in certain subjects, and the admissions people commented on that because they're like, we know you can just put whatever you want on here. And so I would say be honest. If you have a student who's done C work, and we were kind of upfront, we had a couple of times with our oldest, his senior year, because we're like, we know you've already gotten into your school. We know that you have your scholarship, but we also told them this is what you were going to complete, and so we need to get through this. If we don't, we can't, in all honesty, give you that completed transcript for that course. so that's kind of what I would say is it's that fleshed out transcript that does matter, which if you go through the challenge program, your student is going to have more so than the letter grades.
So that's not a question that's easy to answer because we're not there when they're actually going through them. But I will tell you the sense I got, and the sense I got was that it very much varied from school to school. There were some schools for whom it's pretty clear test scores matter a lot, but there is sudden right now we're in the middle of a cultural shift where for various reasons test scores are becoming overall less important. Still important for homeschoolers, but overall less important, which is why those course descriptions, here is what my students study, and you have some liberty there, right? You want to honestly communicate what your student has studied, but you can give the course names that fit the kind of thing that they're applying for, right? So, for example, you can call British literature, or you can call it something like literature and composition, right? Because it is both in challenge. And so it just depends on, what your student's going for, how you might choose to word that. You have some liberty. The goal, and she said this so well, is just to communicate as clearly as you can what your student has studied. Because that way they're going to be able to look at that on one page typically. Just, one page, that transcript, and they're going to be able to see, oh. And then if you put that book list on the back, that really seals the deal as far as showing here's what when we say British Lit, here's what we mean by British Lit, right? When we say that he studied, science, here are the four sciences that we used and that we did, and they'll be able to see that, all there.
So I did have like a detailed, so my first child, it was the first child, bless her soul in so many ways. She's stuck with me. She is totally the guinea pig. I had created this entire portfolio, and true story, like she was what, 6th grade, 7th grade, when we did that whole, like, we went to this seminar and on how to pay for college. I was like, I've got to do this right. And it's probably because we were scared to death. We both had very little experience in any of this. And so we were there, like I created from 9th grade to 12th grade this extremely impressive portfolio. Everything she did, every activity she did, everything, where she served, every job she had, everything. And we went and visited the school that she wanted to attend, one of her choices. And we were sitting there at the big whatever thing we were at. And I look over and she's like filling out this thing. And I was like, what are you doing? She said, oh, well, they said if we apply today, we don't have to pay the application fee. So I'm applying to college. And I was like, what the heck? No, we have this whole folder. Like, I need to present this stuff, Like, I need to, walk in that office and present this folder of all this stuff. And they need to look at it. And I want them to read it all. And they didn't want it, any of it. Like, literally, I don't think they took any of it. And actually, they asked me to put my transcript on one page. They didn't want the book list. But that was that school. I'm going to go back to, you need to know what that school's expectations are. Also, we're in that cultural shift. More colleges are wanting student interviews, which I am so thankful for because our students really excel in that. And you can see their character. They can get to speak, and so I'm really impressed with that move. I don't know where it's going or where it is in what schools, but that's why it's very important for you to know. So it's hard to know what they're looking at and what they're not looking at. Sorry.
Just real quick, I just want to say when we're just to help you guys make sure everybody understands, it's not like CC is only sending kids to private Christian schools or something. From our own community over the last several years, we've got a young man at West Point. We've got a young man who's flying Black Ops helicopters in Afghanistan. Now he's in special ops training in the Middle West. We've got young ladies, missionaries in places around the world that we're not allowed to say. We've got folks who are managing snow ski resorts and what's the thing that they do on ice hockey? He drives a Zamboni. I just think that's the most awesome thing. He gets to drive a Zamboni. And so we got a guy doing that. Let's see. So we have folks who are teaching, and boy, I could talk a fun time about the skill of just public speaking. How we watched one kid who was scared to even talk, and now he's finishing his teaching degree and is going to be teaching others. So they go to so many different places. When I say skills work across subjects, I really mean it. Like, you get to see that God's path for each student is so different. And yet it is wonderful to see how the things that they get during these years cause them to thrive and to flourish because of those skills that they have. So.
Gwendolyn. Wait, the PSAT? You can take the PSAT. Oh, pre-ACT, sorry.
Yes. I don't know anybody. I'm guessing that's across the board. We never looked into that. The only way we have found our students sometimes take the PSAT, we found one little charter school that would cooperate with us. Otherwise, none of the other schools will allow homeschool students to come in and take it. As far as the SAT or the ACT, anybody can go on their sites and just register.
One thing to say about that, though, this is another reason to talk to those admissions departments. Some schools will say, take the SAT 20 times if you want. And they'll say, we're going to take the best math score and the best reading score of all your 20 tests, right? There were other schools that said, we penalize you if you take it more than 3 times. Okay, so that's why you need to talk to those admissions departments, right? Because that made an impact on what we plan to do, right? So.
And then going back to the grading question earlier, if your student is testing low and your transcripts say A+, then that's when they do see, like, oh, this is a little wonky here. Like, the mama's giving them all straight A's, but their test scores are like down here. And so there's where your integrity is coming in. Like, I don't know.
This is one place where CC Plus really helped, because that is an outside person giving your student a grade. And so in our case, our son did literature, Latin, and math, and had in those 3 subjects, an outside professor who had given a grade. Having that outside person do that and have that on the transcript, that does add to the credibility of the transcript.
Yes. Kimberly. Absolutely. That's
I think I would go back to much of what Justin said about discerning the will of the Lord. And I'll throw a book recommendation out there. If you've heard of Kevin DeYoung, Just Do Something, it is short, and it talks about the will of God. It talks about colleges and things of that nature. That's an excellent, easy read. Your high school student could easily just digest that in a day. And so that's something that I would say is helpful. And it goes back to something Heather said and Justin has said is, what are your goals? What is your aim with this particular kid in mind? My kid who's probably going to do blacksmithing or some kind of trade. we kind of know and have an idea of what things he may be engaged in later in life. And for your kid, you may not, that may not be as clear. And so that's conversations that you kind of have with your particular child, and trying to understand and discern, okay, what kind of path, as we're looking at the various paths, what are we looking at as potentials? And we explored like the community college dual enrollment program. We actually had a kid who was enrolled for one semester. We ended up pulling him out because then the CC work just went away. It was like, okay, you can't take college courses if you're not going to do your high school work. And so we just said, you're not doing it. And they weren't happy about that, but I really didn't care. And so, I'm trying to run this ship the best way I know how. And so if you attempt it, it's okay to say, no, we're not going to finish it. And so that was the case with us, and just knowing if it's going to cause this kid to fall off the ship, then we'll just abandon that ship and continue on the course that we were marking out primarily. And so that would be some help, I would say.
Added to that, I would just say a couple of things. We say that community college is free. The textbooks are not free. They are extraordinarily expensive. And what we found too is that now the way they do them is you can't like go buy old ones because they all have their online code that you have to put in, and that doesn't transfer. So you still have to go buy the $150 textbook just to get the code to be able to. So it's not free in that sense. It's not free in the sense that at least the one semester that our son took one math class at the community college, it disrupted the entire day, every day that he had class. And so it took time. The 30 minutes to get there, the 30 minutes back, the 3 hours. It really messed up his ability to stay in a routine. So there was that cost as well. The bigger issue is that while it can be helpful when checking off boxes for future career or future skills, for us, God and character is still more important than the skills. And at least for our kids and most of the kids that I've known over the years, it's not like the cement has set by the time they're in Challenge 3 and 4. They are still, that's really when the best worldview conversations and the best shaping is still happening. It's when the cement is settling about who they're going to be. So wonderful if they become a plumber, wonderful if they become a blacksmith, wonderful if they become a lawyer, wonderful if they become a teacher. But what matters more than those careers is what kind of person they're going to be while they're doing them. And for us, the benefit of Challenge 3 and 4 as opposed to community college is it's shaping the kind of person they will be once they get into those future careers.
Yeah, I think, too, for us, we just kind of had a talk at one point, and we decided we're not in a hurry, and we're okay with our kids going to community college. We're okay if they want to do a trade, but we also want to send those well-rounded people out into the world. We want sons who are going to be, hopefully God will have them be leaders in their churches and things like that. So there are other parts of them that we hoped to see developed before they went on to that next step. And so when we weighed the possibility of saving a little bit of money on community college, if that was where they were going to end up, we just felt like for our family that was a decision that we made early on.
I was going to say that exact same thing. It's hard because for me, like when my first daughter got in, was challenged, ninth grade, I was like, oh, okay, dress rehearsal's over. Now I need to prepare for real life. And so you feel this rush, right? And naturally as homeschool parents, we get in this now we got to get in the game of life, right? It's like all of a sudden, everything, this beautiful picture I had of my homeschool, this restful learning, these conversations, all of a sudden, that's no longer the priority. And it happens slowly, and I don't even think intentionally, but we feel this pressure of the world. It's like, oh, we have to graduate them, and oh, they have to go here, and they have to do this. And those pressures start drowning out what God had already given you the vision for, and you staying the course. And so I would encourage you to, think about what is the rush, what is the benefit of this. Yes, it is. So for our children that did go to PCC, or one of our children that is in PCC, everything is free, even the books, because everything's online now. So yeah, there's a huge cost. They are trying their hardest to get our kids. No physical books. There's no physical books. None of my college kids have no physical books, and that's just the way things are going. Just saying, but So it was free. So it's very enticing, extremely enticing. But that one semester that I let my son do it, and we had multiple reasons behind that. I have no desire to send him back because of that. Like, there's just some concrete things that need to be settled before you're ready for that. And so, yeah, so there was not, so it is free. What I was going to say is also, if they do choose that college, community college path after graduation, most likely it's still going to be free. There are so many grants and so many scholarships and so many things out there. Like, yeah, I mean, actually, they can get more money. It's kind of.
Yeah. One thing I would just add, kind of piggybacking off these guys, is you need to recognize too that there's going to be a competing worldview that is going to be taught in these schools. We have found that to be just upfront and in your face, and have kids coming to me and showing me videos and lectures and things of this nature, and because some of our kids are well grounded in the scriptures and knowledge and love for God, they've been able to discern and work through this. But they're really trying to figure out, okay, well, how can I fit in this realm of study, given that you're teaching it from a quite different worldview? And so those are certain things that you recognize if you have this kind of dual enrollment. You're going to have a whole lot more conversation, or it's going to be necessary. If you don't have them, then they're going to be likely in trouble, because we know statistics of many kids who go off to college and then embrace a different worldview that they've learned. And so it increases the risk, in my opinion, the younger they start that. So we want to build that foundation before kind of sending these arrows out that we've tried to equip into the world.
Absolutely. So about the cost is typically about half of a credit hour at a normal college university. So it is still savings, and it is still allowing, if you take full advantage of it. For example, we had a student in our community this year who he graduated from our community and went to college and was basically already done with his freshman year just through the CC Plus classes. So it does provide a lot of those things that some people are trying to get when they do the community college route. Now, the way it works is CC is cooperating with Southeastern University in Tampa, Florida, somewhere in Florida, and but that's simply the school that's giving the accreditation, okay? And that's because you have to have a particularly, what's that? Well, that's going away. It's all going to be through Southeastern University in Florida. So, and that's because they have really embraced this. They're the ones who are also now offering the master's degree programs for homeschooling moms. And they are so passionate right now about the students they're seeing come out of classical conversations. They're hunting down our kids to be future professors. I mean, they are really, really excited. And so it's a really cool partnership that's developed. Most of these professors who are involved in CC Plus are also challenge parents, so they understand who we are. They understand what we're walking through. They understand where these kids are coming from. The way it typically works is that your student typically begins around challenge 2. They may have some offerings in challenge 1. They're expecting college level work. It is a college class. You wouldn't find the subject that your kid is struggling in and sign them up for a CC Plus class. This is to get college credit. So you would look for something that your student typically is fairly advanced in. And the idea here is that largely they're going to be able to follow the guide and be able to submit the same work that they're doing for challenge onto an online portal where it will also be assessed by that professor and then graded. Now, occasionally a professor might ask for a little extra assignment here, or maybe your challenge director said you guys don't have to do that, but because you're doing CC plus, your student's going to need to do it, right, to be able to submit it. Now, I'll tell you what it was like for Jonathan for Latin. His professor was fantastic. The fella, his name is Stephen Dilday, and we know him because we went to school with him, and cool guy. I won't go there, but what he's doing with his life is very cool. So anyway, what he would do is he would send to his students, here are the exercises from the Latin that you need to submit to me. So Jonathan already knew ahead of time for each lesson, whatever else, these are the 3 or 4 exercises per lesson to make sure that I get done, because those are the ones that I'm submitting to him. For math was so helpful for him in CC Plus because he resisted showing steps. But remember, the goal is not, can you solve a quadratic equation? It's, do you know the skill of logical thinking moving from step to step? So his professor says, here are the questions I want you to do from the Saxon book, and I want you to show me your steps, right? That was the test. That's right. He wanted him to submit the tests, but to show the steps for every problem. That was invaluable for Jonathan. I'm just going to say that. And then he did the British literature course, and I already mentioned that in his case, writing is more his gift. But there had been some things where I would critique him, and at a certain age, they don't always want to receive what you're offering to them. Which age is that? Right, that's right. That's right. Having an outside voice that sometimes was saying the same things, right, meant the world to him. And his writing really improved because of the feedback that he was getting from that professor. Now, in the end, because he decided to go to where he's going, and because half the reason he's there is to get these wonderful basic liberal arts classes from a pretty awesome Christian perspective and all of that, we ended up stopping with CC Plus because we didn't want him to be getting any more credit ahead of time. Because the whole reason he's there and paying the money is because of the benefit of those professors and being able to sit under those professors there. So it also, you want to know your goals, and you want to think about where you're headed to decide whether that makes sense.
Yes. I will just say, as a homeschool mom, the fact that somebody else was evaluating his citations and teaching him how to properly cite and do those sorts of technical things that are so easy to, when you've had a busy week and this essay is due, that's the last thing on the list. So that was helpful.
Allison. No, they're just so, yeah. So to summarize, CC Plus is a program that we have that there are professors that will assess your students' work and sometimes give them maybe an extra assignment or so. And if they pass at the end, they get a college credit to go along with this class. But they are not teaching the class. Let me go to Alexa first. She's been waiting. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Right. I will, and then I'll ask Justin maybe if you've got anything else to add to this. I will say it is different. The workload is different in 3 and 4. If you survive 1 and 2, it is definitely seems like a lot less. And I say that laughingly because Challenge 1 is a major jump in the literature. You know, there's just a lot of books to read in Challenge 1. So it does lessen, but the depth grows, it goes deeper. So the workload is less, but it's deeper. It's heavier, but also there's a responsibility because they don't just start owning it. They're going to be rhetorical in their skills, so they oftentimes are leading the seminars. So there's another responsibility in that aspect. But what happens is at this point they're so excited about it, and they are rhetorical, so it seems easier for them because they've worked through the hard stuff. The dialectic is truly the hard where they're wrestling through. They are now at the place where they can enjoy these things and they enjoy the discussions with their peers, and so it's just different. I don't even know how better to explain it.
Exactly. If you use that illustration where we said we started the kids at the kiddie end of the pool, challenge 3 and 4 is now where they're becoming real swimmers. And they're real, and they get to enjoy the swimming. They get to dive off the diving board. They get to experience. So for them, it's in one sense for challenge 4. In our case, challenge 3 was not a huge workload down, but challenge four, Lee intentionally created to be a celebration year. It's a year where the workload is intentionally lighter, and also because CC understands most of these kids have jobs by the time they're in Challenge 4, and that's part of their education too. That is the forming of who they're going to be. And so Challenge 4 is intentionally lighter. Challenge 3, I think, often can seem lighter because they are becoming better swimmers. They become more rhetorical. They're taking more leadership of the seminars, and so it's so much more conversation oriented, and so the flavor of what's happening, especially on Community Day, changes quite a bit.
Yeah, our homeschool counselor. Do you know much about what she does? I haven't either. I haven't reached out.
I can tell you
I
what
know
it
on a personal
was.
level, but I don't know what
just
she
haven't
does.
looked into it in many years. But what it was, and I'm assuming it's still there, is CC basically had these folks available to CC parents to be able to ask these kinds of questions. Exactly what we're doing right here. It's somebody that you could use as a resource. The truth is now CC's at a place where there's so many families who've walked through this that most of our CC folks are going to be able to know somebody or know somebody who knows somebody to be able to get a lot of this kind of information. But I'm not sure if they're still there.
Yeah,
or
well,
not.
that's when they first started. They hired Martin. What's her name? Anyway, they had hired her for that purpose. But I think I don't know how that works now. Good. Okay. Oh, good. Okay. That's great. Yeah, weighted, unweighted, yeah. Videos to watch over the summer kind of thing as you're praying through that. Yes. Sarah. I know. So the question was, I realized this a little late. People online are not going to be able to hear the question, so I was trying. That's why I repeated what CC Plus was earlier. So just so y'all know, I'm going to try to repeat a little bit of what you said, and I think this will be a good place for us to end because that's a good ending. So her question was, what do you do about those students when they reach that challenge 3 and 4, about who don't want to continue, who really want to have that high school experience, want to go with more friends? Is that kind of where you're going with that? Would one of y'all like to speak to that? Justin?
I'll just give one testimony. So we had a young man that came to us actually in the challenge 1 year, and he had never done ECC before. His mom was struggling with him at home, and she finally said, "I don't care what you want to do. We've decided this is what you're going to do." And I had him in challenge 1, and it was, he was there against his own will. As he walked through the year, the peer environment began to have a positive effect on him, and we began to see him beginning to change. But for him, it was the challenge 3 year. His mom made him be here that was transformative for him. And at his graduation, Miss Connie Lipford was his director, and he made the comment, he said to Miss Connie Lipford, "You have made me see that I am capable of so much more than I ever realized." And he had a complete change of heart by the time he graduated from Challenge 4 about what he wanted. And in fact, in his case, he ended up doing his senior thesis on folks who, if I can remember, not having a stigma towards folks who have mental illness. And by the time that he had graduated, he decided he wanted to go into Christian counseling, and he's finishing his degree in that. So he's just an example of someone that I was able to see on campus, watching God change his heart, watching God change his personality, just watching God move in him as the peer influence, but especially the influence of directors that were holding him to high standards. And he didn't like the high standards. He was kicking against the high standards. And then he got through them and looked back and said, "Wow, I'm so thankful for those high standards." And oh yeah, we have had many families who left and came back. Many families who have left and come back and said, we realized that if, at least in their situation, they realized that they were going down a path, and whatever this road was they went down, it was not bringing the same kind of fruit, and so they jumped back on. So.
And that's one reason you have to know your vision. You have to have your husband on board. You have to be a team, and you have to be, because they're going to push back on hard things. I mean, they start at 2, right? Like, they're going to do it, and it doesn't really stop, right? They think, especially when they get older, they think they're in the rhetorical stage. They think they know what they want, and they think they know what's best. And it's worth listening to. It's worth having a conversation. You want to honor that. But it's also, at the end of the day, you say, we have prayed about this, and God has showed us clearly what is best for you. So you're going to have to trust us in this process. And for us, some of our children have come back and said, thank you for that. I am so thankful for that. And so you just have to trust what you're doing. It's hard. It is hard. But more the reason we need community, and we need to do this together. Because when they see their friends doing it together and their parents are together and we're all like-minded and we're all going after the same goal, it sure makes that load a lot lighter. And so I'm going to end with that. I'm going to ask Marty to pray over us. I do have some resource stuff that you'll probably like. And you can read over it on your own time and go to all the websites and the homeschool counselor thing. That will be helpful to you. Allison, if you don't mind at the end, would you get those out from behind the thing and just set them out? And then I'm going to have Marty pray.
Father, we're grateful for the opportunity to explore together. We recognize that you are our creator, and you are the one sustaining us even now, that you are the good shepherd who is leading us. And Lord, we want to follow you. We want to abide in you because we know apart from you we can do nothing. And so, God, we need your help. We need your wisdom. We need you, the counselor, the comforter on days. We need your strength. And so we're grateful, Lord, for how you provide that to us in and through Christ, in and through our church family, and in our homeschooling communities as well. We're grateful for friends who are striving side by side with us with these same types of goals in mind for our children. And God, we just pause to think what you might do through the children of the parents in this room, and how the next generation might be influenced or impacted because of what you will do in and through them. And so, God, you're quite capable of doing far beyond all that we could ask or think. And we pray to that you would do far beyond what we could imagine, to bring the hope of the gospel to the far corners of the world, to bring excellence into a variety of vocations, and to see our children know and love and serve you their entire lives. And so, God, I pray that you would strengthen the parents, maybe help them in the midst of their fear and any anxieties, that they would come regularly to you by prayer and petition before you, trusting that you will lead them and you will help them and you will supply every need that we have in Christ Jesus. And so we're grateful for this time. We hope that it is an encouragement to your people, and that they would be truly beneficial, benefiting from these conversations, and that it would stir them on to love and good deeds. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen.